Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Udis, in this series on the network of global corporate control. Today's segment is about gold and is pre-recorded. Thanks to DCTV, Carmen Stanley, studio producer and director, Maurice Jackson, audio and prompter, and Cruchet Starnes, floor director. Our first segment on gold was in August 2015. And I'll give you a little background. This series has been on air every Tuesday since early May 2015. I'm the lawyer for a trust called the Global Debt Facility that contains the world's monetary gold reserves. General Eisenhower and President Truman agreed to deposit the U.S. gold in the Global Debt Facility on behalf of the United States. All nations' monetary gold reserves are with the World Bank and IMF, and their ministers of finance and development administer the Global Debt Facility. I vote the U.S. shares on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF so long as the United States Constitution of 1789 is not in effect. The world's bankers and the ones who issue your currency have been trying to run the world. They've been telling you lies. We're going to change this corrupt arrangement in a global currency reset. The chance this comes to pass? Over 90%. We know this from the National War College's power transition model. We are now in transition, and this transition is called the global currency reset because we're going to exchange the world's currencies for local currencies issued by villages and towns, and for national currencies minted out of the world's monetary gold reserves. First, we're going to replace the currencies issued by the nation's private central banks with currencies issued by the real national governments. At the moment, your governments have been replaced by corporations that belong to a private company which is part of a large corrupt conglomerate that is called the network of global corporate control. The existence of the network of global corporate control, also known as the Banking Cartel, was shown by three mathematicians at Switzerland's Federal Institute of Technology, Vitali, Glatfelder, and Battiston. Enough people know about this corruption and the difference between reality and the lies in the media controlled by the Banking Cartel. This explains why the Marines attacked the CIA's branch office in Langley on November 18th. Humanity has used gold as money through the ages. Monoatomic gold has special properties which we will review again. Before we turn to gold, I want to remind you of your role in the global currency reset. This morning, the day before we pre-recorded this segment, Maria liked what I tweeted on the 6th of December 2017. There are some screenshots of the tweet that are going to be in the teleprompter that I upload. The tweet was about Donald Trump's announcement that he wanted to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. In the tweet, I talked about the reality that the corrupt banking cartel is trying to hide. The chances that we all start living in reality, the reality where the United States remains strong and unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes are replaced by currency out of gold and local currencies, this chance is over 90%. This series is about how we all start living in reality. What I said in the tweet that Maria reminded me about, quote, "People stay calm. The insolvent banking cartel wants to provoke you during the global currency reset. The banking cartel's news outlets give you nothing but fake news and lies. Yesterday, I outed Bloomberg." And the screenshots of the rest of the tweet are at the end of this teleprompter. In the year before this series began, an agent of the banking cartel threatened me when I wouldn't bring him before the interbank screens to view the financial statements of the Global Debt Facility. I refused and forwarded this threat to then Senator Mikulski, who was on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and I asked Senator Mikulski if the CIA had anything to do with the threat. This was before I knew how deep the corruption extended, and that Congress has been extending a state of emergency and suspending the U.S. Constitution of 1789 ever since 1871. Between 1861 and 1871, the United States was under military rule pursuant to the Lieber Code. Now there's a critical mass of people who know about the corruption in our money system. I tweeted the letter that I wrote to Senator Mikulski, and it went viral. Last week, I showed everyone that the banking cartel cannot remain hidden when so many of us see the corruption in our monetary system and realize that we have no choice but to end state capture. Whether it was the CIA that threatened me for doing my job as overseer mandate trustee concerning the United States monetary gold reserves in the global debt facility, well, I'm pretty sure it was. Gold is very much in the news. On December 7th, there was an article in Russia Insider about how Russia and China are buying up gold to replace the Federal Reserve note as the international reserve currency. The simple logic of Russia and China's massive gold acquisition, quote, Russia and China are just going about their business of conducting business, and when all the major competent pieces are in place, it will be too late for the U.S., UK to retaliate, close quote. The article goes on to say, it's also no secret that Russia is looking for the exit door where the Federal Reserve note, world reserve currency, U.S. dollar, is concerned. Russia has made it very clear that they are making all the necessary moves to stop using the Federal Reserve note, U.S. dollar, as their primary currency to settle international trade. Gold will probably handle Russia's trade settlement just fine. This was, of course, how the banking cartel thought that they were going to force the unilateral surrender of the United States. As a critical mass of people know, the United States has access to its monetary gold reserves in the global debt facility. This is reality, and what the banking cartel is taking great pains to try and hide from us. What I'm going to do now is to show you the disconnect between what the banking cartel has been telling you, both in the mainstream media and in the alternative media. I'm going to show you what I've been telling you all along during this saga. I'm doing this to help you during the global currency reset, when the media is going to keep on spreading their disinformation, masquerading as reality. No, folks, reality is with us and not with the banking cartel. More and more people are going to be joining us in reality. I also want to reassure you about the transition during this period that only a critical mass knows what the reality is, when we're going to bring the others up to speed. Do you remember the clip on murmuration? That is how starlings fly in large groups at sunset. We ran this clip last July, and in the teleprompter, I'm giving you links to 2 clips, and one of those clips was in a teleprompter. Human beings are interconnected, just as starlings. This means now that we're all in reality and we're interconnected, the banking cartel has a much, much harder time disrupting us or frightening us or making us panic with their lies. We process information with our hearts and with our collective unconscious. And this information, that is the truth about the world's wealth and the global currency reset, it's going to wind down the network of global corporate control, the banking cartel. As insurance, I'm advising you to keep some gold or silver on hand to use as money in the unlikely event that there's a crash of the world's currencies and the Federal Reserve note. This is the same advice which I gave to a gold trading firm, Rosalind Capital, that contacted me in August. Rosalind prepared a chart on the price of gold in the 21st century, which I hope is being projected on the screen behind me. And I'm giving you my correspondence with Rosalind Capital and some more background information in the teleprompter. The Federal Reserve note is not the same thing as the dollar. For as long as our recorded history extends, and even before that, we've been exploited by a network of global corporate control that remained mostly hidden from us. Thanks to the people who have gone before us, including Jose Rizal, Ferdinand Marcos, John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, we can turn the tables. Corruption has been coming into view. So the very first thing that you can do is to be open to seeing things the way they really are. What do I mean by that? Don't rule things out. An example is the strange property of monoatomic gold. Monoatomic means one atom. We're talking about gold where the atoms are not bonded together. It turns out that monoatomic gold, when it's heated, grows very light and then it disappears. The banking cartel kept interfering whenever I tried to tell you how we found this out. And I'm giving you the URL for the clip on monoatomic gold that we first showed you on the 25th of August in 2015. And we then repeated it on the 21st of February in 2017. Where does the monoatomic gold go when it reaches its melting point? Think about it. The banking cartel has a very hard time dealing with the subject of gold because the world's gold is in the global debt facility. It was with the gold traders that I came into public view. Tekoa da Silva was the third person who published an interview with me. I've reprinted that interview, which was published on May 7th, 2013. And there's a link to that. The audio file is no longer available. Christoph Lehmann did the second interview, and he called it Whistleblower Bretton Woods Near Collapse. In that early interview, I mentioned Germany's demand from the Fed for the return of 300 tons of gold. And I said, German Federal Bank Bundesbank announced on January 16, 2012, that Germany is repatriating 300 tons of gold from the New York Federal Reserve. In that article, I simply repeated conventional wisdom that the United States had taken Germany's gold and the gold of 50 other countries for safekeeping at the end of World War II. Also noting that Germany's announcement followed 3 months after the Federal Reserve refused Germany's request for a physical inspection of vaults in which Germany's gold was stored. Instead, the U.S. Treasury Inspector General's office published a paper audit. Wolfgang Struck told me about the global debt facility in an email on the 8th of May, 2013. The banking cartel had hoped to co-opt me and shut me up. They hadn't counted on my continued resistance. Earlier this year, I pointed out the lies in the alternative media that there was ever a physical audit of the U.S. monetary gold reserves. Instead, I knew that there was only a paper audit from the documents I reviewed in connection with Germany's repatriation. This was the qualifying language in Treasury's Office of Inspector General about the gold audit. Quote, as part of obtaining reasonable assurance about whether the schedule is free of material misstatement, we performed tests of Treasury's compliance with certain provisions of laws and regulations, non-compliance with which could have a direct and material effect on the determination of schedule amounts. We limited our tests of compliance to those provisions, and we did not test compliance with all laws and regulations applicable to Treasury. We caution that non-compliance may occur and could not be detected by those tests, and that testing may not be sufficient for other purposes. Now, they just looked at whether Treasury could be counted on to follow the laws. They did not perform a physical audit. I downloaded from the Internet Archive documentation on the paper audit, which conflicted with a bogus Freedom of Information Act request that was published by Control1. None of the Banking Cartel's liars in the alternative media has ever explained the discrepancies between their so-called Freedom of Information Act request and the archived paper audit. This Freedom of Information Act request is bogus. Silver and Control1 didn't try and defend their lies after I pointed out that there was only a paper audit as revealed by the March 7, 2017 DCTV segment, which debunked their scam. And there's page 4 of the teleprompter that I've read to you again. Silver and Control1 never responded to my calling them flat-out liars, or showed how the audit could have taken place when the Treasury Department specifically said that there was no physical audit, but a paper audit only. Why did the Treasury Department remove the statement that I showed in the Wayback Function? And after the information that the Treasury Department doesn't exist in the Federal Register from James Traficant, which I published and which has now gone viral. YouTube removed this comment from my YouTube channel. The comment quotes the Federal Register, and I'll read you from the Federal Register. The United States federal government exists today in name only. Congress expelled James Traficant, who had served for 9 terms representing Ohio. Traficant died in 2014. And somebody whose Twitter handle is I See You commented, United States Congressional Record, March 17, 1993, Volume 33, page H1303, Speaker Representative James Traficant, Jr., Ohio, addressing the House, said, Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the United States government. We're setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it's a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It's an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9, 1933. And then there's a quote for the site for that law, Public Law 89719, declared by President Roosevelt, being bankrupt and insolvent, and that was in the 73rd Congress on June 5, 1933. And that was a joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolving the sovereign authority of the U.S. and the official capacities of all U.S. government offices and officers and departments. And it's further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. The receivers of the United States bankruptcy are the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. All U.S. offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status in name only under emergency war powers. With the constitutional Republican form of government now dissolved, the receivers of the bankruptcy have adopted a new form of government for the U.S. This new form of government is known as a democracy, being an established socialist communist order under a new governor for America. Now, we're actually in interregnum. The Fed returned Germany, could you scroll back? The Fed returned Germany's gold earlier this year. This was necessary even though the Fed had to purchase the gold on the open market in order to quell the rapidly spreading doubts that the Fed had held any gold. If the Fed does hold any gold, it's in only token amounts. The rest of the U.S. monetary gold reserves are in the global debt facility, where I have the voice and vote of the U.S. until the Constitution of 1789 goes back in effect. People, stay calm. The insolvent banking cartel wants to provoke you during the global currency reset. The banking cartel's news outlets give you nothing but fake news and lies. Yesterday, I outed Bloomberg. Donald Trump is a mere bit actor and not the legitimate president of the U.S. The U.S. is in interregnum, and its monetary gold reserves are in the global debt facility and being guarded by the world's militaries. We are at peace. Last week, we talked about the show of force to the CIA by a Marine Expeditionary Unit and said that the U.S. military knows that the CIA is headquartered in Switzerland and does not have the security interests of the U.S. as its mission. This indicates that enough people in the military remain loyal to the U.S. Constitution and to their oaths to prevent the demise of the United States. This is also since Germany and Japan do not want the U.S. military to surrender unilaterally because of the unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes. The corruption coming from the central banks and the rest of the companies that own them, the banking cartel, through a rigged money system is getting exposed. The secret martial law that was in effect in the U.S. ever since the Civil War in 1861 is over, now that a critical mass knows. A critical mass of people sees through Donald Trump's charade. This includes the U.S. military, over 70% of them, according to my information. The banking cartel has lost its ability to manipulate us and is continuing to lose more and more control. The banking cartel owes more than $2 quadrillion and is being wound down in a trust called the Global Debt Facility. The more the banking cartel tries to convince us that it's business as usual, the more we see that this is not the case. I've got 5 minutes. Good. Okay, well, let me go back into some information that I have put in the teleprompter for the next week's program. We're pre-taping this, and tonight is actually the first night of Hanukkah. So let me give you some of the comments that people have been making on the YouTube. One question was, why should I single out Trump? A man named Brian Scott Dawkins said that Trump was trying to change from the inside and save America and the world, and that instead of telling everyone that everything has been illegitimate and it's all corrupt, which it is, I could make a difference only if, like Don, I had some clout. Now, first of all, I just finished reading you that the federal government is bankrupt. So what on earth is Donald Trump doing if the federal government has already been declared bankrupt? And we never got out of bankruptcy. The Constitution has been suspended. There was no electoral college. This is just the banking cartel lying. And some people think that if you make a lie on a big enough scale, that it's becoming true. Well, that's not the way truth works. Okay, so I had an answer to that question. I said to Brian Scott Dawkins, Trump has fooled you. You're a fool. Trump is betraying the United States. I'm not arrested. I'm not charged with treason. Instead, I'm defending the Constitution of the U.S. and the Bill of Rights that enable us to stop sending our taxes to the corrupt bankers when we don't owe them interest, and they owe us instead $2 quadrillion. Trump is an actor, a liar, and an agent of the banking cartel. And in the time that I wrote the reply, YouTube had already erased my computer. I had to retype it. If you only saw what my life is like, how I have to work with what the banking cartel is trying to do, it's really, it's quite evident to me that there is a banking cartel and that they're trying very hard to lie. Let me read you some other comments. Well, this Brian Scott Dawkins kept going on and on. He was obviously just an agent of the Banking Cartel. And I put a draft letter which I had written to Brussels. You know, I testified in the European Parliament in 2012. And this is what I wrote to them and tweeted. Dear Mr. Sipos, on Tuesday, the 15th of May, that's 2012, the European executive directors of the World Bank met with members of Parliament. The pressing item sent out below was not discussed, as it would not have fit in with the rest of the questions. An April 8, 2005 letter from the Joint Economic Committee of the United States Congress to the World Bank inquired whether the bank's board of executive directors always is in possession of accurate and timely data on the bank's accounting and financial position. The European Parliament's Committee on Budgetary Control shares the Joint Economic Committee's goal that the Board of Directors and the public are being presented with accurate and timely financial information, and that any accounting irregularities are promptly discovered, disclosed, and corrected. Mr. Gregory Ingram, then head of the World Bank's Operations Evaluation Department, Mr. Vincenzo Lavia, then Chief Financial Officer of the World Bank Group, and Carmen Lapointe, then Auditor General, refused to reveal to the Board of Executive Directors the World Bank's unsatisfactory performance in a project in the Philippines that ended in a $493 million banking failure, the corrupt takeover of the second largest bank in the Philippines, and the impeachment of Joseph Estrada, then President of the Philippines. I disclosed that cover-up. Thank you for listening to today's segment about gold. We've seen that the banking cartel is lying to you about what happened to the United States monetary gold reserves. They are safe in the Global Debt Facility, which is a trust that is managed by the World Bank and IMF Board of Governors. I have the U.S. vote on the Board of Governors, roughly 16%, because the banking cartel has bribed the Congress to declare a state of emergency and suspend the Constitution. This is after 10 years of martial law rule following the Civil War. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis.